Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Thursday, October the 9th, 2025, and today we will talk about bindweed versus cover crops, interplanting with figs in a tunnel, a perennial living pathways challenge. See what I did there? A perennial living? Anyway, you will, so let's do it. All right. Happy Thursday, everyone. Actually, it's technically Wednesday for me as I record this because as you hear it, I will be at the Kentucky Composting Conference. Very excited about that, but it means I have to leave here too early to record an actual episode tomorrow. So anyway, it's Thursday for you, and I will be there talking compost and probably doing it right now as you listen to this. Last year, I did a whole talk there, as you will remember, on compost in the market garden that I posted here on this channel. I'll link that in the show notes if you're interested. It's on the 4 different types and how to think about compost. This year, I'm doing a couple different panels, so that should be fun. Also, there are lots of nerds who come to these sorts of events here in Kentucky that I'm always excited to hang out with. So that's what I'll be up to, or literally am up to right now. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed yesterday's interview. I love these ideas that challenge traditional concepts of land ownership and land stewardship like that. Very interesting stuff. Maybe makes land a little bit more accessible. Make sure to check that out if you have not already. All right, it is Thursday for you, and per tradition, we are going to tackle some Patreon questions to stay caught up over there. Our first Patreon question comes from Patreon member Bailey, who writes, quote, "Hi, thanks for keeping me company in the garden all summer long. Grateful for this content. We are battling some serious bindweed in our market garden. I know in recent episodes you've said that the best/only way to manage bindweed is to tarp for a year. In windy Wyoming, tarping can be a real challenge, and we're trying to move away from plastics. What do you think about a heavy cover crop of Sudan grass that got mowed and watered for an entire season? Certainly wouldn't eradicate it, but maybe knock it back a bit. Thank you, Bailey at 2nd Street Farm, Lander, Wyoming, 4B5A." End quote. All right, so thanks, Bailey, and bummer about the bindweed. That's unfortunate. Okay, well, the short answer to your question about the Sudan grass versus the bindweed and mowing it and that sort of stuff is I don't know. No one does really, not entirely, but in researching this question, I did come across a sort of a meta-analysis on bindweed management in organic systems that found shade was fairly effective at diminishing bindweed populations, which could bode well for you. However, it seems that the best time to utilize the shade is actually in the early spring, so a winter wheat or something like that over the winter or headed into the spring as a cover crop, so the bindweed can't take hold, might be the best place to start. That said, sorghum Sudan grass and Sudan grass have also both been shown to help with bindweed as well. So it's not a bad choice in cover crops. I actually think it's a pretty good one. The shade is a big part of that because these are both the sorghum Sudan grass and the Sudan grass itself pretty tall plants and cast a lot of shade. Of course, using these crops, that's not likely to just get rid of your bindweed issue, but as you suggested, maybe knock it back a bit. The truth is there is a decent amount of research on bindweed management in organic systems, but in that research, there are no magic bullets revealed. Tarps are probably the only real answer there in terms of just like getting rid of it, but I feel you on the wind factor and of course the backing off of the plastic factor. Our last farm was on a ridge and it was the windiest place I've ever farmed. The tarps were regularly rolled into giant heavy knots that I had to not only untie and move around, but ended up spending way too much of my time dealing with. And they also would like roll over other crops and crush them, which was not my favorite thing. There was no amount of weight you could really add to them to keep them down in the spring. I once parked a truck right on the edge of one of them just because I knew it was going to be a windy day and the tarp just ripped. So yeah, wind remains the worst, just the undefeated worst. Otherwise, when it comes to bindweed, the recommendation is often for perennial management, like adding aggressive grasses and such, instead of annual management, which doesn't at all help you. It's going to take some intensive and thoughtful management to steer clear of tarps on this particular plant, but between intensive cultivation and the cover cropping, I think you have a shot, or at least a shot of having a more reasonable amount of bindweed to contend with as you grow. All right, I don't know if I really totally answered that question very much or very well, but the studies are somewhat limited. And to be honest, as some of the meta-analyses that I found pointed out, the studies that we do have are a little short in duration, lasting only a few years. That just makes it hard to get a good idea of what can be really effective on a long-lived perennial like bindweed. Anyway, what say you all? We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, fig interplants? What? Find out. BRB.
Farmer Claire Coleman here from the Winter Growers Podcast. Did you know that I also founded Real Farmer Care, a nonprofit that supports farmer well-being? From my own experiences farming, I knew firsthand that this type of support was missing from ag, so I decided to do something about it. As of today, there are over 500 farmer recipients of a $100 self-care award, with more applying daily. If you'd like to help, each $100 donated supports one new farmer. Visit realfarmercare.com to donate and learn more. Again, that's realfarmercare.com.
If you, the listener or viewer, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere the questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's second Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Nathan Meadows, who writes, quote, "Hey Jesse, I think about fig trees way too often. I remember hearing Blake Cothran speak at Oak a few years ago and give a talk about small fruits. He mentioned that figs don't do great in Kentucky, but suggested they could be successful in tunnels. When I let my ADHD/entrepreneur brain run rampant, this is what I daydream about. I want to build a small tunnel for a few fig trees, but don't want to invest in the space just for one crop. What can I interplant with figs to pay for the tunnel?" End quote. Okay, so thank you, and very interesting question here. So for starters, I also love figs and think about them way too often. I absolutely think they are a magical fruit, and I sometimes think I should just take my tunnels entirely out of production and just grow fig trees and just eat them until I go out of business. But it sounds like the dream. Anyway, interplanting with figs could be a bit tricky, especially if you hope to get any sort of sellable crop out of the interplant. That said, you could have the option of something that overwinters, but summer stuff, because the fig plants are fairly large, might be out of the picture. Like during the summer months, I'm going to imagine, although to be clear, I've not tried it myself, only ground-dwelling flowers like sweet alyssum or possibly clovers and Roman chamomile, if you want, some perennials, would make the most sense, but those are not crops that really produce much of anything for you, more just for the beneficial insects and such. Winter stuff could also get a little bit tricky, but just for a thought experiment's sake, here are some ways I think I could see an interplant sort of playing out. One example is that lettuce might be a nice option for a winter interplant option for an option. You get what I'm saying? Basically, you'd want to be getting those lettuces in later in the fall, which could be tricky with the fig branches and leaves everywhere still. But if you could develop a good system for that, you could theoretically grow lettuce all winter into the spring and make a nice financial return on that, probably enough to justify a small tunnel, especially if figs are also producing well and you have a nice market for those. Ditto spinach, kale, arugula, those sorts of things, the sort of smaller, lower growing, cold hardy crops. Figs, depending on where you are, might have to be pretty heavily mulched over the winter to keep those roots alive, even in a tunnel. So you'd also have to factor that into your production. Like you're going to have a heavy amount of mulch around those figs over the winter, so you won't be able to grow right up against them. I don't think interplanting with figs will be an easy thing to do, but that doesn't mean it would be impossible. I think growing enough food besides the figs could be tough if you really relied on the interplant for revenue, but you could be crafty about it. I do think since figs would be the main crop, definitely makes the most sense to focus heavily on the fig production first, ensuring that you get that absolutely right, and then look for ways to make that profitable in the spaces that you find, maybe selling not just the fruit, but also cuttings for plant starts or something along those lines. You may just have to be creative to make that work worth your while. And then, like I said, use what extra space that you see to produce some other higher profit crops. I also like the idea of using that space below the figs to produce something like maybe mushrooms, oysters, or shiitakes, or even wine caps. All could work. But there are others too, reishi and etc. That could be a good use of that shade, of that space. Or I suppose as an alternative, you could use that leftover space for grow bags that you could theoretically move in and out of that garden space as needed based on the season and available sunlight for things like herbs or strawberries, etc. There is certainly a lot of potential, but it may just take some good planning, and in that good planning, at least one or two creative plan Bs. I guess the second one would be plan C, but it's all semantics. Anyway, I hope there was something in there of interest, and others can feel free to add their own ideas or experience into the mix. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, Living Pathway Challenges. Be right back.
Hey everyone, Farmer Mike here out at Central Kentucky Zone 6B. Just wanted to throw my quick 20-second video into the mix here. This is 2 50 by 100 foot plots sown to pea and oat cover crop for the winter, and it's looking pretty good. Coming in nice and thick, yeah. These will get tarped briefly in the spring just to kill any of these little annual weeds. Yeah, It's coming along great. We just got an inch of rain and it's a beautiful day. Bye.
Today's episode is brought to you by Farmhand. Renewal season is here, and the work you put in now is what brings members back next year. Ari Memar, founder of Farmhand and a guest you've heard on this podcast, has worked with regenerative farmers to create a playbook that turns renewal season into a growth season. One farmer, Melanie at Shake Fork Community Farm, brought in $40,000 in renewals in just 2 weeks using this strategy. Now, Ari and Melanie are sharing the exact approach in a free live workshop and downloadable playbook. Watch on demand and get the playbook at farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show. Our final Patreon question of the day comes to us from Patreon member Keith Knowles, who writes, quote, "Ahoy, Farmer Jesse." I love it when people say ahoy. Anyway, I'm in Zone 8B, Central Alabama, and I have used Living Pathways a couple of years by just managing the spaces and leaving native grasses. This year, I tarped over winter and then in spring bed prep, seeded white clover in the paths. I must say, until about mid-June, it was lovely, and I was very happy with the performance. However, by mid-July, there was little to any clover visible, and the native grasses were doing what they do in Central Alabama. 2 questions. Should I expect any of the clover to return in the spring, and do you have suggestions for more hardy options that may have a better chance at fighting the native grasses when extreme heat and humidity inevitably arrive? Thanks much. P.S. Notice the screen note of October being when you seed your paths with clover. This ties into my question. I will have growing green field grasses until November down here. I battle a little Bermuda here and there, but overall it is well controlled, end quote. Okay, so good stuff. And as I will start every discussion ever about living pathways, they are absolutely not for everyone in every region. If you want to try them, start small, trial it, see if you like it, and then slowly grow into using living pathways as you figure out the system for the smaller areas that you've tried it in. Now, with that caveat established, the challenge of seasons is one of the many things that make living pathways complicated. And this is especially true in warmer regions like Alabama, where the growing season is almost never ending. Specifically, the challenge is that there is no one crop that will serve you all year, especially not in that climate. In the dead of summer in hotter regions, clovers tend to retreat a bit and get lower to the ground, allowing the more aggressive heat-loving grasses to take over for a while. Then in the fall, the clover will begin to rebound and hang out all winter. And indeed, I oversow some clover in the fall just to fill in the gaps. And it could be, in October for us, but maybe November for you. But the reality is that there really isn't a crop in most regions that is good to go all year. Now, in colder climates where the growing season is relatively short, white clovers really can do most of the work for you between snowpack melt in the spring and snowfall in the late winter. But if you have a mildly long season like we do here in Kentucky, but especially somewhere like Alabama, it's just nothing is going to be pumping that whole season. They're going to have a peak and maybe 2 peaks, maybe one in the spring and one in the fall, but in the middle of the summer, they're going to go down. Or maybe you have a summer grass that you like that does well in the summer, but it's not going to do as well over the winter and the fall. So I honestly don't have a good suggestion for you that just isn't another grass. Grasses, because of their ability to manage heat so well, tend to do better in the summer, but most of the summer grasses are not the ones you really want around your plants either for their ability to spread by roots or rhizomes, or their desire to go to seed suddenly in the late summer without almost any warning, which is not my favorite. So yeah, I guess welcome to one of the many weird challenges of living pathways. Now, to be sure, there may be native options for you, different plants that will work well that I don't have here or that I have not run into. But like with everything in the living pathway domain, trial whatever else you want to try in a small way first, and then slowly expand it out once you've determined it's going to work for you. And then, of course, report back to us and let us know how it all went. It's impossible for me to know, obviously, how all the different crops will work in all the different places. So I do rely on you all a little bit to keep us informed on what you've been learning. Otherwise, I think that's it for this Thursday. Great questions, as always, Patreon members. Don't forget, No Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. That includes Patreon donations, so just keep that in mind. But you can also learn about how to donate through our we'll just call them the show notes. You can learn about how to do it in the show notes. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrows.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at no-tillgrowers.com to support our work. We also have some beanies over there. I know the cold's starting to come, at least up here in the northern hemisphere. So, if you need a beanie, or if you need a birthday gift, it's all fair game. I won't even ask you what you're doing with it. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of October, you get a big shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to, there were no new signups. So no continuation of the story today. That's going to put a lot of pressure on me for tomorrow. So, part of this is that you get a story continued, and part of it is you don't put a lot of pressure on me to finish a story in one go. So we will finish it up tomorrow somehow, some way. Think on that. All right. Thanks for watching and or listening. We'll see you then. Bye.
The heart and the past changing so fast like a curve.